Для меня большая честь представить Владимира Питербарга, питерской аудитории. На самом деле, если будем говорить о Лондоне или Европе, скажем, Владимир не нуждается в представлении абсолютно. Вот. Но как бы в России, поскольку у нас область деривативов не сильно развита, соответственно, о Владимире мало знают. В двух словах, Владимир сам из семьи потомственных математиков, который сначала закончил МГУ, потом получил PhD в университете Южной Калифорнии в Лос-Анджелесе, потом работал в Банке Америки и последние 8 лет возглавляет отдел численной количественной аналитики в банке Barclays в Лондоне. Вот. И, соответственно, Владимир был первый человек, который по версии журнала «Риск» и портала «Риск» получил звание, был награжден знанием Quant, что большая заслуга, потому что до него это звание присуждалось только один раз как кому-либо. И в том числе Владимир является автором бестселлера более 1000 страниц трехтомника по interest rate modeling. Ну, в общем, вот такое введение. Дальше передаю слово Владимиру, и Владимир будет презентовать, говорить по-английски, потому что профессиональные темы проще говорить по-английски, вопросы можете задавать по-русски. Соответственно, из двух частей состоит презентация. Сначала будем обсуждать проблемы фондирования, дисконтирования и залога, соответственно. В второй части совсем маленький Владимир расскажет про рекрутинговую компанию банка Barclays, которая открыта в том числе и для аппликантов в России. Прошу рекрутировать.
Спасибо, Максим. Спасибо за приглашение, за возможность выступить перед вами. Развитие деривативных наук в России — это дело сложное, но благородное. Я готов поддерживать это как можно. Как Максим сказал, к сожалению, по-русски не очень хорошо, так что особенно темы финансовые, так много вам слишком So the talk, what I'm going to talk about is basically the foundations of derivatives pricing and the changes that we need to make to it in light of the events of the global crisis. And I'll explain sort of where that comes from. But before we go there, I'll always be talking from a point of view of a bank engaged in derivatives trading. Okay, so that's, since I work in the bank that's engaged in derivatives trading, that's kind of the point of view. The derivatives valuation, I hope everyone knows what the Black-Scholes formula, right? And the Black-Scholes formula has a little letter R, which represents the credit risk-free rate at which you discount the sort of risk-free investments. So if we look at the world now, so the risk-free rate you receive on a money market account, so you invest something today somewhere, and 10 years later you receive your money back at this rate, and it's completely credit risk-free. Well, if you look at the current economy, there are very few things that resemble a risk-free money market account. Where would we put our money into without credit risk? Can we give it to another bank? No, I mean banks default fairly regularly, right, and trade with significant credit spread. Can we give cash to the government? Well, some countries are, have defaulted, some are about to default. Even the United States trades with a significant credit spread. So there is really nothing in this world where the bank, a big bank like ourselves, can put significant amount of money without incurring credit risk. So where does it leave us from the point of view of pricing derivative products? That's where my talk is coming from, and we'll look at the mechanics of funding, which is what the bank does with the money, with the cash that it gets, and where it puts the cash that it has, and what kind of rates it attracts. So we'll take that and we'll examine that and see what comes out in terms of value derivatives. The problem was not, the question was not a big issue before the crisis because multiple rates that were involved in different funding activities such as the bank funding rate, the LIBOR rate, the Fed funds rate, the government rate, they're all very close to each other. So there wasn't any, now they're all very different. So, and that's where we're coming from. So this part probably is something not many of you are already familiar with. So derivatives trading happens in two formats, right? There is exchange traded derivatives that you probably have heard of, which we'll put aside for now. The majority of the trading among big broker dealers, big banks like ourselves and our corporate customers, happen over what they call over the counter or on a bilateral basis. So you basically make an agreement with another counterparty that you will be selling and buying derivatives with them. And this agreement, it's a legal agreement that specifies many different things, how the payments are made, this and that. And it's, there's a sort of more or less standardized set of documents that's called ISDA Master Agreement. ISDA is the industry association that has come up with this standard legal agreement that people can take as a basis for the trade. The part that is important to us is Credit Support Annex, CSA, words you will hear from quite a few times today. It specifies credit risk mitigation in derivatives trade. So when we have two banks and they trade with each other, they're naturally concerned about the other counterparty defaulting, going bust, and then what would happen to the derivatives, their contracts that you've entered into. So this CSA specifies a number of measures that the bank put in place, essentially legal measures, to protect ourselves against the default of the counterparty. One of the key things in CSA is the idea that you have to post collateral. If you have a derivative where you are owed money in the future, so you sold an option, you bought an option and somebody promises you some payoff in a year's time, well, if the counterparty defaults, you're not going to get that money, right? So you say, well, you promised me money in the future, but I need money now to collateralize against the risk that you default. And that goes both ways. So if we as a bank owe money by some other bank, we call them and say, you owe us so much, please post collateral. And if we owe, we post that. So in the case of default, all we need to do is just keep the collateral that we have, and the derivative sort of goes away. That's the key part of CSA. There are other important things there, which we're not going to worry too much about, but just so you know, there is a netting. So if we have multiple derivatives, so two derivatives in which I owe you some money and you owe me some other money on the other derivative, they actually net. So only the difference between the promises is sort of at risk. It's not done one derivative at a time, it's kind of put it all together, calculate the overall portfolio valuation, and that's what the collateral is coming. What else? So even though all the agreements are based on this ISDA Master Agreement, which is sort of the foundation, they all get changed. So most of them get changed when we agree, when Barclays sets an agreement with Deutsche Bank, the lawyers can decide that there are some provisions they want to change, and when we do it with Goldman, again, there is a process by which we sort of change the agreement because of, for various reasons. The important things that can be changed in the CSA are eligible collateral. So what constitutes a collateral that you can post? You can post cash, but also you can post cash in different currencies, right? So it would specify you can post dollars, you can post euros, but say you cannot post yen. It's just what the two counterparties decide is convenient for them. It can also specify you can post bonds, government bonds, corporate bonds, other assets. So the list can be quite long, and it's important, and I'll explain why. Rates paid on collateral. So when we give somebody collateral, it's still our money, and so they have to pay us a certain rate for sort of holding our money and using it for whatever they use their money for. So that rate is specified in the agreement, so it's a contractually specified rate. And again, we it's a matter for negotiating when you set up a CSA. So although usually they're fairly standard, there could be differences. How often will you post collateral daily, which is kind of standard for your weekly or monthly thresholds. Sometimes you don't want to post collateral if the change in valuation, it changed by a small amount because it creates operational burden and so on. And what is the minimum amount you will post? So there are all these details. That before, kind of, as I said, Quants really had no clue. I learned what at least the master agreement was maybe a few years ago. And I've been in these for 15, 16 years. So it wasn't important then, it's important now, so we'll become a specialist on CSA. And let's look closely at what happens when we trade with a counterparty on a collateralized basis. So we have party A that sells a whole option to party B. Okay. So we sell an option. So B pays B0, B stands for value, 0 means times 0 today, goes to A. So far, seems like a standard sort of derivatives 101 picture. So A, since A sells an option, A promises to pay the payoff of the option at the expiry, let's say 1 year to B. So it promises to pay something in money. But it's a promise of money, and obviously subject to credit risk, so it needs to be collateralized. So A needs to post collateral. But how much? Well, it's the value of the promise, which is the value of the whole option, which is B0, right? We just determined it was B0 by virtue of paying that much of the whole option. So the money that B paid to A goes right back to B in collateral. So on day 0, there is no exchange of money. Now, what happens during life? Well, the value of the option fluctuates, right? The option depends on the underlying stock, on the volatility, those things change. So come tomorrow, the value of the option is different. And that means that A will either pay more collateral if the price of the option increases, or ask back some of it if the option price declines. And at the same time, B will pay the overnight rate that they agreed on the outstanding notional, on the collateral notional at that time. And it's not too difficult to see that at any point in time, the total collateral posted by A will be VT, which is the value of the option at that. So let's recap. I want to contrast it again to the sort of traditional picture that we kind of have in mind from school, that an option you pay the premium today, nothing happens for a year, say, and in a year's time you get the payoff. Well, how does it work here? There is no cash exchange at inception, as we discussed, because the premium goes right back as a collateral. It pays continuous cash flows. So every time the value of the option changes, it triggers a payment on the collateral account. And at any time, this contract will be dissolved, and we can keep the collateral, because the collateral we hold is always equal to the value of the derivative. So you can say, right, if I get the derivative, I keep the collateral, everybody's happy.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Isn't it just the mark-to-market system like in futures?
Yes, actually that's my last point. Where was it? Right. So again, as I said, it's very different from buy and hold. And for those of you who know futures, maybe I should have said it in the beginning, it looks very much like a futures contract. But remember, it's not a futures contract. It's a bilateral agreement on a complicated derivative for your portfolio of derivatives. And the future, you can think of a future as collateralized forward with collateral rate equal to 0. Because in futures, you don't get you get the money back rather than a collateral. This is the same sort of story of cash flows for collateral in a picture form. Skip over it, you can look at it later in the slides if you like pictures better than words. Okay. So far when we talked about derivatives, things like options, what about sort of cash instruments, things we hedge those instruments with, like a stock, right? It actually fits very much in the same pattern. When the bank needs to buy stock, right, it needs some money. Where does it get the money? Or in sort of bank language, how does it fund the stock? Well, it borrows the money and pledges the stock it just bought as collateral. It's called, and tomorrow it unwinds it, and if it needs to keep the stock, it does it again. It's called the repo transaction of the stock. So you always, and the rate you pay is the repo rate. This is the rate you pay on the money you borrowed that's secured by the stock. So it's not like bank has a vault of cash and you need to buy stock. You go to the vault, you get cash, you pay. No, you just borrow the money you need and pledge the stock as security. This is why does it do it? Because it's if you need to go to the bank vault and get the money to buy stock, well, that money is funded at the bank funding rate, which is usually a very high rate, like LIBOR plus 200, because it implies unsecured borrowing. Whereas if you borrow the money using stock, you pledge something for the loan of money, so you get a much better rate because you also get stock as collateral. And so it's more efficient in that way. And then we get on the hedges, we get the same type of behavior where we have sort of collateralized purchases as we do in the derivatives. So this is, so let's get to the point of what we're trying to do. We have a fully collateralized counterparty, and the main question, what rate should we use to discount trades with that counterparty? It will turn out to be quite a difficult question, so we'll answer in some reasonably general, but nevertheless not fully sort of full generalities. And for the notations, I will use, as I already done, VT is the price of a collateralized asset between A and B. So if it's positive, that implies for A, then party B will post this amount of collateral. And CT is a contractually specified collateral rate. So in that case, A will pay this rate to B. And let's do a bit of a cash flow analysis. We have A that buys some collateralized asset from B. So slightly more formalized example that we had before. The amount of BT is paid by A to B. Well, at time T, as we discussed, the mark-to-market is VT, so the amount of VT is posted by B to A, the same amount. Now, what is the next instant in time? Time T plus BT. A will return this collateral to B. It will also pay interest, as we said. So it will pay B, which is the outstanding collateral account, times the rate C, times the amount of time that we held it to B. And then there will be new collateral, right? The new mark-to-market is the value of the asset at T plus DT. And party B, so we'll take this amount in collateral. Alright, so let's now put this all together. There is no actual cash exchange at time T, as we discussed. At time T plus dt, let's see what is the net cash flow today. So it gets a new collateral at T plus dt. It has to return this collateral VT, and it has to pay this V times. Okay. So this is the total amount of cash exchanging to A, paid to A at time T plus dt, which we can rewrite as dVT minus C. And remember, at time T plus dt, we can just cancel the transaction and keep the collateral, and everybody will be happy. So how can we use this cash flow? So the cash flow, I guess one thing to emphasize, the cash flow is stochastic, right? dV is V, typically is modeled as a stochastic process, so it's an unknown quantity at time T. At time T we don't know what the exchange, what cash flow will get when it was. So let's see what kind of pricing theory we can develop from this analysis. We'll start with two assets, both collateralized with rate C. Each one follows some sort of stochastic process with drift. So Vi has drift mu I, volatility sigma I. They are both driven by the same Brownian motion. Okay, this is the case we're considering. And this is, if you think about it, this is a case of a stock option being together with a stock, considered at the same time as a stock. Okay? So V1 will be stock and V2 will be an option. So what can we do to get sort of a pricing formula? And the pricing formula to me in this context is if we know the payoff at time t capital, what's the value of it at time little t? That's what I'm trying to get right now. So we don't know for each asset, we don't know the cash flow that will be paid at time t plus dt, but we have two assets. And we have one source of randomness, so we can put together a portfolio that will cancel the effect of the randomness in the cash flow that we receive tomorrow. That's what we will try to do. So having two assets, each one, what kind of portfolio can we put together to get rid of? And the randomness comes from DW. This is kind of the thing that we don't know at time t. So we go long asset 1 in this notional, sigma 2 V2, and go short asset 2 with this notional, sigma 1 V1. So what is the cash flow, the cash exchange at time t plus t? So it's the asset 1 notional, this much, and we know from previous slide this is the cash flow that will be paid associated with V1 minus short this much of V2. And we see we did it such so that when we plug dv1 and dv2 here, the terms with dw's will cancel. Okay? So for some manipulation, we get an expression of this form for the cash flow that will be paid at time t plus dt. It has no dw term, which is important. It has no dw term. What does it mean? It means it is known at time t. So it's a cash flow that will be paid at t plus dt. But we know at time t what it is going to be. Now we're in a situation where we traded the portfolio, we exchanged no money today, we know how much will be exchanged to from us or to us tomorrow, and tomorrow after that we can cancel the whole thing. Well, the only way we're going to trade, or our counterparty is going to trade, if this cash flow is zero, right? Why would you suddenly tomorrow give $100 to some guy and you'll be happy? So this thing has to be zero, which translates into a condition like this that involves the volatility of the second asset and the assets and the real measured drifts and the collateral rate. If we now we can use this expression to rewrite our dynamics for the two assets in terms of a new process dw tilde, where dw tilde is dwt plus this one, which happens to be dw plus this one, as seen from the first formula. So since it's the same Brownian motion, still the same Brownian motion that appears in both equations, and now each one has the same drift, which is just the collateral rate, we can find a measure under which dw tilde is a Brownian motion, and then in this measure, from this equation, we get the relation formulas for both of our assets, which tell us that the right way to discount, so there's discounting factor, the future payoffs of collateralized assets is the collateral rate, CS. Okay. So what happens if we have two different collateral rates? So So we have two assets on the same parallel motion, but two different collateral rates. Well, the same thing works. You just, instead of C, you use C1 in one case, C2 in the other case, and you still find, excuse me, the same parallel, the same measure, under which we can write the valuation formula, where now asset I is discounted at its own collateral rate CI. So when we have an example of a stock and an option on that stock, so the stock will, what is the collateral rate on the stock? It's the repo rate. So it's a rate you obtain by pledging your stock as security for the loan. What is so C1 would be repo rate. What is the option collateral rate? Well, it's the collateral rate you agreed with the counterparty when you set up the CSA. So it could be something like an OIS, an overnight rate in Europe. Right, so we got the pricing equation for like one asset. But what we're trying to go is to sort of an interest model of interest rates, collateral. So for which I need to consider more than two assets, many assets at the same time. The story kind of works. I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but if we have n+1 collateralized assets in an economy where we have n sources of randomness, we can again construct a portfolio that will pay a specific known cash flow in the future, and that cash flow has to be zero, from which we can do a change of measure where all the assets grow at the same collateral rate. And so if I think about those assets as zero coupon bonds, which is the building blocks of an interest rate model, we will obtain a model of interest rates that looks exactly like a Heath-Jarrett-Morton framework, except instead of a risk-free rate, whatever that might be, in that framework we have to use the collateral rate that is used among us and the counterparty. It is also possible that the same story works when different assets have different collateral rates. Again, we'll have a single measure in which each asset will grow with its own collateral rate. Right now it's slightly more interesting, complicated. Let's look at a multi-currency case. Okay? So, as I mentioned before, a CSA agreement can specify that you can post dollars or you can post sterling, for example, as collateral. So the same, and we can trade derivative, and then the counterparty can decide which one it want to use. So we'll have the same derivative collateralized, potentially collateralized in dollars or sterling. Another case is the same, or another sort of important case. LCH, being a London clearinghouse, is the place where a lot of collateralized trading happens. It's a clearing house where members have to post collateral, and they have very specific rules and simple rules that says an interest rate swap in dollars has to be collateralized in dollars. In sterling, it has to be in sterling. So it's always in the currency of it can only be in the currency of the swap. But the cross-currency swaps, also where you exchange payments in one currency versus another, they're collateralized in dollars. But traded by itself, it would be collateralized in yen. So to do that, we need to consider now zero-coupon bonds, which are the building blocks of our interest rate models, collateralized under different currencies. So we'll have two currencies, keep it simple. So we'll have zero-coupon bonds collateralized in the domestic currency and some other foreign currency. So we'll have an economy where we have domestic and foreign assets and an FX rate, XD, expressed as the number of domestic, which is denoted by D units per foreign. So the domestic collateral rate will be called CD and the foreign one CDEF. And then we'll have PDD, okay, TT. So it's kind of getting a bit cumbersome, but one D stands for domestic asset, the other D stands for domestic collateralization. Okay? And I forgot which one stands for. We'll get there. So a domestic bond collateralized in domestic currency, it falls into what we've discussed. So it will just generate a cash flow of this type, right? Trade when we trade. It will just generate CD sort of rate. We'll have a CD rate. Now let's consider a foreign zero coupon bond collateralized with a domestic collateral. Okay. So nominal F stands for foreign bond, D stands for domestic collateral. Now let's be a bit careful about what kind of cash flow this bond will generate. Right, we buy it. So we pay PFD in currency F. So it's paid by party collateral. Collateral is domestic collateral, right? So we need to take the foreign price, convert it into domestic units, and post that as collateral. So the foreign price is this, PFD. The amount in the domestic currency is this. And that's what's posted. PFD times tax. Okay, then at time T plus DT, the same amount is returned, and then the domestic rate is paid on the domestic collateral, which is P times tax. And then the new collateral is just PFD plus DT. So if I put this all together, so the mark-to-market is the new collateral is obviously the mark-to-market times the FX rate in the future. So the cash flow at time T plus DT looks slightly different. Now we have PFD times X minus, well, the domestic rate times the same amount. So it's not just PFD here, but alright, so we have one cash flow and we have another cash flow. What we don't know, and that's not enough, because we have kind of three things, right? We have PDD, we have PFD, and we have X. And we have only two equations that tell us the cash flow. Where do we get the equation for something else, for X? So from 6, you can only deduce the drift of the combined, from these two equations, this one and this one, we can find a measure in which PDD and PFD times X, they both grow at rate CD. But knowing at which rate PFD times X grows doesn't tell us at which rate either one grows. Because the foreign bond collateralized in domestic currency, we don't know what kind of rate it is growing in this measure. So we need one more equation. So, and we'll look at the effects. Suppose we have one foreign unit of foreign currency. Now remember, if it was so sometimes convenient to think of FX as just as stock. Okay, so analogous to stock. So if we had having 1 million, if we had one unit of stock, what kind of cash flow would it generate? Well, it would be a repo rate, right? We can repo it out. We can borrow money by pledging the stock, and we'll pay the repo rate. So that would be easy. Now we have 1 unit of foreign currency. What can we do to generate a domestic cash flow? Alright, so we can give it to somebody else and get its price in domestic units. Okay, so we give £1 and we receive $1.6. So, and agree that we'll reverse the transaction the next day, okay, or the next instant. We would get back our £1 and pay back our dollar plus whatever rate the other dealer wants to charge us. Right? What we're basically doing is we're borrowing domestic money by pledging the foreign currency as collateral. So what is the rate on that transaction? Well, that's what the market will determine, whatever it wants to charge us and whatever we want to pay. And that would be this rate. So as a rate I give to the domestic loan collateralized by foreign currency. And the cash flow generated by 1 million of foreign currency will be given by this. And the transaction that I described is an instantaneous FX swap, And actually these things are traded. They're called tomorrow next FX swap. So when you exchange money today, but agree you will reverse the transaction tomorrow and plus whatever rate is clearing rate. And this rate has nothing to do with the domestic collateral rate, foreign collateral rate. It's just yet another rate that's determined by the market. Now I have enough equations to figure out, to set up an economy where all these things have dynamics. Let's recap. We have instantaneous FX swaps that generate these cash flows. We have domestic bonds and the domestic collateral that generate these cash flows. We have foreign bonds collateralized and domestic that generate these cash flows. So we start with the real world dynamics of these three quantities, X, P, and importantly PFD times X. And then we can change, since we know the cash flows, we can change the measure in which QD, we'll call it domestic risk neutral, in which the FX rate will grow at the FX swap rate. Domestic bond will grow at domestic collateral rate, and foreign bond times FX rate will also grow at the domestic collateral rate. From which, just rewrite, from which we can derive the variation formulas for FX rate, the relationship between its value today and in the future, the domestic bond. So it pays 1, 0.1 pays 1 at time to capital, so just the exploitation of the accumulated domestic collateral account. And the foreign bond, collateralized and domestic, involves some inputs. So that was the sort of domestic story. You can look at the same thing from the point of view of the foreign investor, and look at the foreign bonds. So foreign bonds collateralized in foreign, and domestic bonds collateralized in foreign, and kind of goes through the same thing. And one extra useful piece of information we'll get is the domestic bonds collateralized in foreign. The valuation formula for this, and this will introduce a foreign risk neutral measure. So, but yeah, the model is actually fully specified by these three equations, and we need to add one more, which is foreign PF. So it'll be 4 is these. This point here refers to some paper that developed kind of this model, but starting from the idea that there are risk-free rates. So they consider risk-free rates and collateral rates. It was, in my mind, it was a bit of a mess. But nothing was wrong there, except that there are risk-free rates that they had to use just to use the standard risk-neutral machinery. They turn out to be, the differences turn out to be the instantaneous FX swap rate. So, kind of can sort of link it to the real, to the truly traded instruments, which is go back. So if you think about the traditional cross-currency model, where we have domestic risk-free rate and foreign risk-free rate, then the rate of the FX will be just the difference, domestic minus foreign, which is kind of the interest rate, so parity rate. Well, here they are completely decoupled. The FX rate has nothing to do with the domestic collateral rate or foreign collateral rate, and that's, I would say, the main difference. And so, forward effects. So how do we calculate forward effects? A forward effects contract pays the future FX spot minus strike, the penalty, or this. So if the forward contract is collateralized under domestic currency, then we know its value today is given by the discounting under the domestic collateral rate. And all these quantities can be expressed in terms of the primitives of our model. And the forward effects rate, K, that makes the value of the forward contract 0 is, so we set this to 0 and we obtain an expression like this. We can also have a forward contract collateralized under foreign currency, and we can calculate the value of that contract and the rate of that contract as well, and they'll be different. I know it doesn't sound like a major revelation, but in the effects in the interest rate markets as of now, people understand the concept of different collateral rates, and they adjust the prices for which collateral is specified in which agreement. FX markets are still maybe in denial, or maybe it's not developed yet, where they think the forward FX is given by God, so there is no difference, between the forward FX rate traded between these two banks or those two banks. Oh, yeah. So, but I think the awareness is spreading that actually those should also be adjusted for the details of the CSA agreements of different people. Okay, now let's move on. So now let's consider a common case where we have domestic asset can be collateralized under two different rates, domestic rate and foreign rate. Sorry, domestic collateral and foreign collateral. As I mentioned, very commonly CSA specifies multiple currencies. So the foreign collateralized domestic zero-coupon bond grows at the rate which is the foreign rate plus RBF. It follows from some of the slides that we had before. So when we have collateral and we can post collateral and we can choose which collateral to post, if we post domestic collateral, we will get tomorrow this rate, CD. If we post foreign collateral, in effect, we'll get this rate tomorrow. So what would we post, domestic or foreign? Well, we'll post the one that gives us a bigger rate. And that's kind of the eventual thing for greedy banks to do. Right? So the actual rate that sort of choice collateral CSA we have would be the maximum between the domestic rate and the foreign rate adjusted for the FX basis, cross-currency FX basis, which we can sort of rewrite as the domestic rate plus this thing, where this thing I call cross-currency basis, which is foreign minus domestic plus the FX rate. So as in the model I alluded to, the traditional cross-currency model, this would always be zero, because the rate at which FX grows is always the difference of two risk-free rates. So the next level extension of the model, once we start taking into account the choice collateral, is to keep this deterministic. So say we know what it is at time zero, but we want to assign a stochastic driver to that. That's kind of the intrinsic that many banks on the street have implemented. So that's already kind of in the overall consciousness of the banks, so that's what you need to do at least. There is no optionality, right? Because this is not okay, so this is sort of the full choice collateral model. Remember the drift rate of maximum of rates that we wrote as the domestic plus the maximum of our cross-currency basis and zero. So we need to discount on this and the expectation in the outside. And this looks very much like an option, right? The maximum between something and zero. So assuming that something is deterministic is not the greatest model, right? It's the value option is zero volatility. If we want to go to the full model, then we need to keep this quantity random, and then we'll get a four-factor model, one for domestic rates, for foreign rates, for FX, and then for the basis. And some people are already looking at what it would mean to include sort of that effect. Here's a picture, you can see well. There are a couple of curves. So what are these pictures? We take two interest rate curves, euro and sterling, express them in overnight forward rate terms. So this would be years, and this would be the overnight forward rate for that point in time. So we convert them all into euros. So euro is the domestic currency in my notation. The sterling is foreign. So this would be domestic curve, the bluish. This would be the foreign curve adjusted for cross currency basis. The intrinsic one would be the maximum of the two. So here it tracks the domestic curve, and then here it switches to the foreign one, which is and then so it switches back to the domestic. Okay? So that's kind of a picture. So that would the curve we would use for discounting if we were using the intrinsic model that didn't put any optionality in the fact that in the future you can switch collateral as well. The one with the optionality is the one that's above it, so you can see for whatever parameters we used in this case, you can see the difference is adjusted by, in the 25 to 30 years, 50 basis points, which is quite a significant amount. That's what you get from this choice option, the idea that not only do you know what's optimal to post today, but you will have a choice, come 25 years later, you will be able to decide then which is more optimal to post, euro or sterling, and then that optionality has economic value. Which is, we'll get to that. So what I showed you is basically the model that we should use to price swaps. Okay? And swaps are very basic interest rate products that until now, have been. We didn't need a four-factor model to price a swap. We would just build an interest rate curve and discount future cash flows. There are a number of problems with where we are now, because if we need to take all this into account in the full form, we have a large number of unobservable parameters. That quantity Q, it's in cross-currency basis, well, we need the volatility of that. Nothing is straight related to that. We need correlations of that thing with FX rate. We have no idea what those are. So that's one kind of issue that makes it difficult to kind of move towards that. There is uncertain horizon. So this idea that people realize that having a choice of collateral to post, creating a lot of problems, right? They put these agreements in place 20 years ago when nobody knew or cared that you can, post different types of collateral. Well, they knew, but it didn't matter. So the industry is moving towards trying to simplify its life. Nobody wants to use four-factor models to price swaps. So as there is more move to clearing that it introduces a very specific, very simple way of posting collateral, these choices disappear, like become simpler. There is a movement towards so-called standard CSA, which will mimic the clearing houses agreements, but will also simplify things. So there is a feeling that things are complex today, and we may think we have this optionality 25 years from now, but in 5 years, who knows? We may, everything can be cleared, and the optionality goes away. So people are reluctant to obviously rely on the full model. It also assumes an instantaneous replacement of collateral, which is something I'm going to spend a couple of minutes on. So we said we can choose the collateral that we post, right? Imagine today it's optimal. It has been optimal to post for Barclays. Has been optimal to post 10 billion of sterling. So Deutsche holds 10 billion of our sterling. Come tomorrow, the curves move. Well, now it's 12 billion of euros. Yeah. Can we call Deutsche and say, can we get our 10 billion sterling back, please, and we'll send you, a check for 12 billion euros? It's unlikely. This is a, large amount of money. moving back and forth. They understand that it's optimal for us, so it's not quite optimal for them to keep that collateral. So it's unclear how quickly they will respond to our request. The legal language actually in those agreements is not entirely clear as any legal language. It's never clear, but you know, probably. So actually there's legal uncertainty even if we can go to court to demand our 10 billion pounds in paid euros. So that's another level of uncertainty in terms of trying to incorporate collateral effects in the pricing. Perhaps more realistic assumption is that the change in the value of the collateral can be posted in whatever currency we have. So if the mark-to-market to us move down, so we need to post more, that extra amount that we post today, we can choose what we post. Right? Clearly they cannot refuse our euros if the euros is in the agreement. And if it goes the other way, we can claim back the currency that we posted before, but not, you know, in the other one. So, when the currency previously posted. And that creates actually a very complicated math problem, because now it becomes a path-dependent problem. Right? If you know it would be optimal for you to post in euros in a year's time, according to your model, but you've posted sterling so far, maybe it's time for you now to start moving euros every time the mark-to-market changes. So if you start incrementally try to replace it with a different currency. And that obviously depends on the path that the mark-to-market take of the swap takes. And it's an optimal choice dynamic optimization type problem, which I tried to put down here a few slides, but frankly I'm kind of running out of time, so maybe I'll skip it. But the message I want to give is that the swaps pricing is becoming very complicated as it is, and which is great for quants, because they need us more and more, so that us taking different trades and forward effects anymore. So there are a few more slides trying to limit it to some, non-collateral trading. Not all trading is collateralized. Sometimes a bank needs to borrow money from the market unsecured because trading is not collateralized. So how do we incorporate that into the same picture? Well, it turns out you can relatively easily expand it and get sort of similar expressions. So these are conclusions. The bank funding is important. All the details in those CSA agreements can play a significant role on what rate we use to discount future cash flows. The framework, we can develop some frameworks, they are rather complex. There is significant uncertainty in market structure because, as I described, people think it's too complex and to simplify. Small details of legal agreements lead to significant different prices. So a lot more work to do. So on that, I will finish my math part of the presentation. There is references, so if you want to know more, I'll вопрос, окей.
Давайте, у нас есть примерно минут 5-7 на вопросы, и потом, соответственно, перейдем к части уже касаемо их. Пожалуйста.
So, according to the famous Black-Scholes model, one of its practical consequences was that it gives at least prototype scheme of risk offset for the seller.
Risk offset for what?
For the seller, for the sell side. It gives at least prototype recite how to rebalance the portfolio to end well. It's, sometimes it's assumed because it influences the market, but okay. Do we have here some analogy?
I mean, the story, I guess, is from what I've shown, the resulting formulas look very much like standard derivatives variation, right? So Black-Scholes, we can still use Black-Scholes formula. We need to recognize what level rate is, it's, the collateral rate, but other than that, everything else kind of remains the same. So you can still a concept of delta hedge,
So this is the way
the option replication still works, but for cash part of replication, you need to use the collateral. Remember, the replication consists of a position in a stock and a position in money market account. Well, you don't have money market account, but you have collateral account. So you can still interpret it that way.
Еще вопрос? Well, it's actually one of them will take you back to this. You've already answered actually about the instantaneous changing graph. Right? But if you just look at what is shown in it was, I think, slide number 8. It's a very basic question. And when you build the Black-Scholes model, right? So you have this money market account that pays you continuous rates. So my question is basically whether it's right to assume that the rates paid in collateral is continuous, and you need to return collateral at the time t plus dt number 3. Is it like something realistic to assume in what?
Of course, collateral is being daily, right? So that would be the standard agreement.
Yeah.
So being mathematicians, we assume instantaneous.
No, I think it's very convenient.
In terms of, but no, daily is not an assumption. So if you want to be really careful, you look at daily changes and in a discrete framework. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. And then another question is basically take it back to the paper published in 2010. I remember somewhere, reading somewhere, basically, if I'm correct, that the framework was already implemented in Barclays, right? And the effect observed are very similar to stochastic volatility effects on the resulting price. Is it correct or not? And my question would be then, if it's indeed the case, wouldn't be what's the advantage of this approach rather than just simply trying to introduce stochastic volatility rate in funding spread and try to kind of model the same?
Before we can, stochastic, I'm not sure what you mean by stochastic volatility, but to have a practical example, you have volatility of a funding spread, right?
Yeah.
And that's the model, but you need a bit of foundations kind of on which to put it, so it's more about that. In particular, that you need the model, the FX growth rate, it's what is it and where it comes from.
Well, I think what was written, my understanding was correct, is that basically you model the funding spread as well. The repeating against this approach means an approach will be model the funding spread, the stochastic volatility. If it exists, but it sounds very right.
Yeah. In fact, I hadn't quite catched. So it's all about risk management, right? So the main point is about you want to prevent cash flow. Is it correct? Or?
It's kind of hedging argument. If you want to, you're trying to hedge your future cash flows. Yes.
Okay. So is it because you have all those standards like I don't remember CSA, etc., and you don't have these standards for these derivatives? Or
no, CSA mitigates against credit risk, right? There is still market risk. So the prices of derivatives move all the time. So we cannot derive correlation formulas by looking at by hedging arguments and finding the risk information.
But do you use this model in real life, or it just
those first thing from real implementations, those still a picture.
Yeah, could you please open once more the slide with the model equations? With three. Could you please open the slide with 3 model equations? Yes. And the question is, well, in fact, it's Black-Scholes model, the analog would be something like standard Katz equation, yeah?
Well, this is just the SDE for cross-currency models. Yeah. It will look the same, except the rates in the DT terms will be different.
Because
you mean this one?
We have it.
You mean this one?
Yes.
And this comes from this. You just observe that this guy is a martingale. So that's, well, not this, but an equivalent of this thing is a martingale. XT discounted RDF is a martingale because it grows at a rate.
Am I right that in, let's say, Black-Scholes model, the corresponding stochastic equation would be just parabolic heat equation, yeah?
There is no PDEs here, right? This is a neutral equation, and this is sort of the consequence of the heat equation. The fact that if you take the eta differential of this thing, you'll get the downward drift.
Yes. And in case of Black-Scholes, what we do, we can solve heat equation and get the analytic solution, this convolution with green function.
Yeah.
And here the analytic solution is not a show.
This will not have an analytic solution.
Давайте перейдем к второй части Марлезонского балета. Соответственно, Владимир расскажет про программу рекрутинговую программу Barclays, что очень уместно, особенно сегодня. И это, поскольку это семинар, у нас часть семинара, о чем я забыл в конце, поддерживаемым банком Barclays.
It's really just a couple of slides. Some information. Okay. Well, I took it from the campus recruitment team, and I've added a couple of things for myself. So I run what we call quantitative analytics group at Barclays. That's about 300 people, most 200 in London, 100 in New York, few in other places. The job, the main job is research and development of derivatives pricing and risk models. Most people have PhDs or masters in math, physics, so people like yourselves, so strong sort of technical background. We do it across all asset classes. That's kind of the core of our group. We also have a group that does high frequency and algo trading model for spot effects. So this is different kind of, if you think black box kind of algorithms that trade frequently in exchanges. And we also look at risk and capital models, which is related to risk management. So, as I said, it's a very mathematical role. These are the things that we typically look for in candidates. So we look for people from sort of probability theory, stochastic calculus backgrounds, PDEs, numerical methods. Programming is a strong component. So that's a very short introduction into QA. Okay. And every year we recruit a large number of interns. So about 30 interns, I would say, every year, who later come as graduates, what we call graduates, which is like the junior sort of quants, and then they grow through the ranks. We've been coming to Russia for recruitment for quite some time to Moscow. I'm myself from Moscow, so that's where we started. You can apply, everyone can apply. What you do is you go online to that page. You put your CV, like why you like Barclays, and there are online tests. There are relatively simple tests, but for Russian, for non-native speakers, let's say, you should practice. I think they give you a few things to practice, so you should try those before you apply. All those who pass online tests, their CVs are sent to me and other senior managers of the Quant group. We look at the CVs, we choose the ones we like that look good. We invite those people to London. We do an assessment center, where it's like you go through 4 or 5 interviews We do 2 of those, one in November and one in February. And then, those who pass those tests, we invite them as interns. Internship could be, so there are 2 kind of points that it works well. If you're like a PhD student in your 2nd year, so this summer you can do an internship and then finish your PhD and come back in a year's time as a graduate. Or if you're already finishing your PhD, you can do what is called an off-cycle internship, which is a longer internship. It's like 6 months. Stażировка, let's call it. And then you can sort of get a permanent job after that. Okay? So those 2 groups, it works really well if you, yeah. What else should I do? So please do apply. If I get a good number of, high quality CVs from St. Petersburg, we'll organize a proper sort of recruitment trip to St. Petersburg as well. Any questions? So last year we had like 6 from Russia, we would get a good majority from France, because French are very strong in this kind of thing, so I'm trying to diversify away from yeah.
So how many people do you usually apply?
By the time I get CVs, it will be probably 200 or so people. Yeah. I don't know, I think probably half don't pass online tests, so let's say 400 or 500 apply. But it doesn't mean, you should go for it. It's a good chance, for people with strong sort of technical background. It's easier than it sounds, yeah.
So just tell again how long the internship lasts.
So the standard internship will be like 3 months, 2-3 months. It depends on how you are available, what time you're available in the summer. From June till mid-June till end of August, let's say. The off-site internship, it can be customized, and as I said, it's kind of 6 months-ish. So for that, when people come, we just put them in some group, give them a manager, give them a project that involves something that they've hopefully seen before, and then they basically do the work while being helped by the manager and other people, and then we give types of projects that we hope can be done over 2-3 months and sort of show how good you are and so on.
The question may be relevant for some. Do you always expect from the applicants to be engaged in a PhD program?
No, as I say half the people in the group are PhD, half masters. I think, this Russian system of like 5 years, I count as a master, so. And many other interesting. Yeah.
Скажите, пожалуйста, какой максимальный возраст кандидатов рассматривается?
А у нас такой есть закон в Англии, что по возрасту нельзя дискриминировать. Все возрасты приглашают.
You worked for Bank of America before this?
I did, yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit why we should apply to Barclays and not No, they did, from your experience.
Barclays is a leading global investment bank. It started small 10 years ago. It has grown 20-30% annual growth rate. It's now what we call premier global investment bank. Obviously, there are a few of those. So Bank of America, I wouldn't count as an attractive place to be as Barclays. It's a huge retail bank. I think its investment bank is a bit of a mess. Through crisis, there was significant differentiation of banks through crisis. So pretty much everyone kind of went down when Barclays bought Lehman, and it actually propelled it into sort of the bulge brackets. If you look at the Merrills and others, most of them have to be bailed out. So the culture is very strong. It's a very strong sort of trading operation, which is great for quants. The quant book is the best in the street. So these are the reasons. I think if you say what are the good places, well, Goldman is decent and JP Morgan. And
Deutsche?
Huh?
Deutsche?
Deutsche, they have very different, you know, in some places, in some areas Deutsche is great. In the quant space, you know, I don't think it's a great place to work. I think they're organized, they outsource a lot to, you know, India and those kind of places.
На этом мы закончим, потому что, к сожалению, Владимир должен успеть на поезд в Москву. Вот. И я хочу вам еще раз сказать, что расскажите своим друзьям, чтобы подавали, соответственно, CV, потому что тогда в этом случае у нас будет шанс в следующем году опять сделать Владимира здесь новую интересную лекцию. Так что, Владимир, большое спасибо.